But for reasons I think you'll see, I want to put chapter 17 of Exodus and chapter 18 together, because they may not look like they are connected, but I do think that they are. And we won't do all of Exodus 17. I really just want to do the war against the Amalekites, or the battle against the Amalekites, and then on into Jethro's advice in chapter 18. So let's read chapter 17, verse 8. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. Whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him. He sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side, the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. And the Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, "The Lord is my banner," saying, "A hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." Many of you all know this semester, this spring semester, particularly, say, January through the end of March, is one of the busiest times I've had in my life. But the busiest time in my life I remember vividly. It was the semester, I was still in seminary, that Amanda actually got pregnant, which is sort of the irony of it. We were so busy between the two newlyweds and working all the time, school all the time, and everything else. To give you an idea what my schedule was like, I was taking, I think, 16 hours at the master's level. Just so you know that 9 hours is considered full-time at master's, and I was doing almost double that. Some of those classes came before the semester and after semester. They were long classes. They were tied to a mission trip I was going to Africa. You've heard me talk about Africa multiple times. But that mission trip took place during spring break, which meant I had to raise money in the middle of the semester, about over $2,000. So I was traveling around various churches while being a youth pastor at an hour and a half away, living in Louisville, driving hour and a half one way at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week if we had a lock-in or some sort of youth event. And I had to raise over $2,000 plus get the shots and all those other things. And you can't get them all at once, right? And you can't get them all from your primary doctor, which was here in Frankfort. You had to go over here, and seminary wanted you to go over there, and you had to fill out this paperwork. And then there was meetings about this and that. You meet your team and everything. And 2 of my classes that semester were language classes. One was I think it was a Greek syntax, and then elementary Hebrew. So I had, 20, 30 vocab words to do a week to memorize. In fact, on Wednesday nights, my wife took Wednesday off. She had to pick one day off a week other than Saturday, and they're closed on Sunday. She chose Wednesday so we could go to the youth. And she would drive. I would do Hebrew on my way to Oynton. And then I would do Greek coming back because I had to have my laptop. I had to parse things and map out a passage and stuff. And I had to have my laptop for that. And my laptop battery will conveniently last for an hour and a half. And the drive from Oynton to our apartment was about an hour and a half. So I had that time, and I had to get it all done during that time. When I got on the airplane to go to Africa, I knew that spring break, I had, it's about 4 weeks left of school, something like that. And every week of school, I had at least one paper due per week of at least 12 pages or more. The first paper due was a 12-page paper on the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. And you think, well, I don't know anything about Friedrich Nietzsche. Well, all you need to know is his name is Friedrich Nietzsche, okay? He's German. That's all you need to know. Not a good guy. Nihilist has shaped the 20th and 21st century more than I would like to admit. And so when I went on the plane, I told myself, I was overwhelmed. I told myself, okay, no Hebrew or Greek. I have to actually have a spring break. no Hebrew or Greek. Instead, I had to read Friedrich Nietzsche, right? And so I was just depressed on my way to tell people about Jesus. I mean, it's just awful. And spent hours reading Nietzsche and all of that. Added on top of that, my schedule was that, I worked almost every day in retail. I worked at the Christian bookstore, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I didn't have to go in. That was nice because Tuesdays and Thursdays when I did all of my schoolwork. Amanda would work late usually on those days, so I had the apartment to myself, and I could just work on papers or whatever it is that I needed. The problem is that same semester, my boss got fired. And as one of the main leaders of, frankly, one of the older people there, I was only, 23 years old or something like that, I had to take on extra responsibility. It was actually offered a few months prior the assistant manager job. Am I glad I didn't take that? Because that would have made me acting manager. And so I had to work 39 and a half hours a week because they didn't want to give me the benefits of full time. And that meant that those 2 days, those brief hours I had off to do schoolwork, I was now at the office, or I was at the store. Added on top of that, of course, Amanda got pregnant. And we weren't parents. We had never gone through this process before. And Amanda understood all of that stuff. I didn't. That meant doctor's appointments and figuring out showers and going to Babies R Us and Walmarts and Target and all that sort of stuff, scanning everything. The panic was overwhelming me. I was making at the time $150 a week at the church and another $150 a week in retail. And now we're going to bring a baby into the world. And Man and I had agreed that when she had a child and we became parents, she would stay home and that the Lord would provide for us. But you think you've got 9 months, but those 9 months go by pretty fast when you're trying to calculate how it is you're going to make it all work. And I still remember the day I parked the car at Southern Seminary and I was about to turn my resume in to become a pastor. Been a youth pastor 4.5 years at the time, and I'm about to go into ministerial referral, and I started to cry. I don't cry. The McDaniels, we don't cry. The Phillipses cry. We don't. I was simply overwhelmed, running on fumes and caffeine and no sleep, and I was exhausted. I had bit off more than I can chew. That is where Moses is at the end of chapter 17, going on to chapter 18. He is at that breaking point. And what he needs more than anything is help. And the model he gives for us is, where does our help come from? And we see it in two places. The first, it should be an obvious one, because I just quoted the psalm, and that is divine help. I wish Don was here. Lane, do you know there may be something you need to click OK or something up there? But you're young enough, you know what a computer is. Divine help is the first one. Is there like a little thing up or something? Yeah, change it and then see if it'll. Now I got it. Good. It does something. I don't know. You walk away from it and it. No, you should be fine. So far in the wilderness experience, the Israelites have revealed they are slaves in a spiritual sense, right? And that's part of the 40 years of wilderness temptation. So they're complaining about food, they're complaining about water. All of these are about the appetites, the desires. And we've explored that in some detail. Well, those are more internal temptations, internal enemies, that they want to go back into slavery. Here, starting in verse 8 of chapter 17, they meet a major external enemy. And these are the Amalekites. And for the sake of time, I don't want to go into a lot of detail who the Amalekites are. For one, we have not found evidence of them, clear evidence, archaeological evidence of them. It is likely they are a loose group of tribes that went by the name of the Amalekites, because they actually show up quite early in the Bible, in the story of Genesis, back in the time of Abraham. However, there is a man by the name of Amalek who is the grandson of Esau, and the Amalekites are constant thorns in Israel's side. Most notable is, beside that they keep having the Amalekites and the Jews fight constantly in the wilderness, most notable is Saul ordered the annihilation of the Amalekites. And you remember infamously maybe, he didn't do it, sparing the king, Agag. You remember what Samuel came and did? He hacked Agag to pieces, one of the greatest verses in the Bible. Just saying it, you know. Well, we know later, I put Hagar, it's Haman, not Hagar. Haman, the enemy of Israel and Esther, is a descendant of Agag. And he tries to wipe out the Jews, who is himself eventually hanged. We are not given any reasons why the Amalekites attacked the Jews. And there's plenty of speculation of why they may have done that. And I don't want to spend it forever on that. But this invasion, this attack from the Amalekites, is the source of a lot of contention between the Jews. So the Jews and Amalekites never got along because of this, right? So you get into Deuteronomy 25. Remember what Amalek did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt, how he met you along the way and attacked among you all the stragglers at your rear when you were faint and weary and he did not fear God. So here they are complaining about water and food, and that's the point that the Amalekites attacked. And the Jews just never forgot about that. Right? They could just never forget about that event. And so there's this constant need for revenge and defense. Well, verse 9 is the first time Joshua is mentioned in the Bible. And it says, Moses said to Joshua, so you're just supposed to know who he is, right? And we figure out he's the general, if you will, of the army. And the plan is that Joshua will lead the army into battle while Moses intercedes on behalf of Israel. Now, Moses is making it clear Israel is not just fighting this battle on their own. And that is the temptation for Joshua, to think that if he has a good enough strategy, he can win. And so all the pressure is going to be on him. If he has a good strategy, he'll win. If he has a bad strategy, he will lose. By the way, let me just add, that's not always the case. I've been around sports forever. And you can come up with the best game plan, and it can genuinely be a great game plan. That does not automatically mean you're going to win, right? There are other factors that come into it, right? You can figure out how to neutralize the other team's best player, but they have other players, right? We played a team, my middle school team last year. We played a team twice, and they had a player on there, the best middle school player team I've ever seen. I know this because I had one of the best middle school players I've ever seen. And this guy was just incredible. He could just boot a ball. He's only in 7th grade. We got to play him again this year. I don't know why I scheduled that. But and I remember when we came back the second time, I put one of my best players, who was a big dude, like broad shoulders, could lay you out. I said, your job is him. And we were able to neutralize him a little bit, right? You're not going to stop Michael Jordan. But even with that, it just opened up the rest of the players, right? You can have the best strategy in the world. But Moses is showing that what Israel needs is divine help. And so Moses seeks this through prayer and intercession. Now, we can't spend forever on this, and we could spend an entire week on this, but the discipline of intercession is rarely addressed in American evangelicalism, including perhaps especially among Baptists. The Bible is full of examples of this. Abraham interceded on behalf of Lot and Sodom. Remember this story? And that you remember he kept saying, if I could find 100, if I could find 50, if I could find anybody who was righteous, right? Interceding constantly. Moses, not just here, but later in Numbers 14, he says, take my life, right? Don't do this. This would not be a good thing to destroy the people of Israel. The Holy Spirit is said to intercede on our behalf in Romans 8. Whenever we don't even know what it is that we should utter, the Spirit intercedes for us. Jesus is said to intercede for us, Hebrews 7. He is able to save the uttermost of those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. And likewise, Romans 8, who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who is indeed interceding for us. So notice that in Romans 8, Paul tells us both the Spirit and the Son are interceding on our behalf. There is a man right now who's your great high priest who makes intercession on your behalf. Right now, he is doing that. So while Joshua and his men fight the Amalekites, Moses and his men intercede on their behalf. And it's significant that for the Bible, the physical and the spiritual world are real. So you can read ancient documents where the spiritual world is overemphasized, that the spiritual world is more real than the physical. A good example of that would be the Iliad, the Trojan War. If you read that, the battle is not between Hercules and Hector. It's between the gods. Just Hercules and Hector are just what you see. Now, when they did the movie, it was between Brad Pitt and the first guy that played Hulk, right? I mean, I can't think of his name, right? Because we live in a materialistic natural world, we don't care about the gods. So for us, everything's physical. You come to the Bible and it says Joshua is responsible for what he does with the military, yes. But Moses is responsible for interceding on behalf of Israel. Both are important. And this is important for us to realize that. Prayer is not inaction. Intercession is not us doing nothing. Every time there is violence or a tragedy or something in this nation, there will be some dude on television who thinks he knows better than what he does. He'll say, well, we don't need your thoughts and prayers. What we need is this bill to pass, whatever that bill might be. And you may agree with that. You may disagree with that bill. But the solution is this. We have to push back on that and say that prayer is doing something. If you really believe in prayer, then you are calling upon divine help. And that's what Moses is doing here. And we're introduced to a character named Hur, not to be confused with Ben-Hur and Charlton Heston and the newer version, which I haven't seen. But here, they will, Aaron and Hur will help Moses intercede on their behalf. Hur will play a significant role in the Exodus narrative. He's the son of Caleb and is of the tribe of Judah. So the battle is verses 10 to 13. And as long as Moses has his arms lifted up in the position of prayer, the Jews win, and so long whenever he drops them, they lose. And so here he is, seeking the help of the divine on behalf of Israel. And the one who is seeking divine help himself needs help. Aaron on one side, Hur on the others. And together, Israel can win. Now, this is clearly Christological, right? I mean, it's not even hard to see it. Moses serves as a type of mediator between God and man. That's a theme we're going to keep seeing in Exodus, particularly Sunday night when we look at chapters 19 and 20. Moses is going to go up to the mountain because there's this chasm between God at the top of the mountain. He actually descends to the top, and the people who are at the bottom. Only one can go between God and man. That's the mediator, Moses. And we get that imagery in the New Testament when it comes to Jesus. In 1 Timothy 2, first of all, I urge that supplication, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made to all people. So that's the general, right, to intercede. But Christ is the one who is our mediator. These are supposed to be in Hebrews. Well, anyways, Hebrews, that's supposed to say 1 Timothy 2. That's why I didn't read right. 1 Timothy 2:5 says, for there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. Hebrews 9 says, therefore he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promise of eternal inheritance. Matthew Henry, I know I put Henry up here. Yeah, there we are. Matthew Henry, it was great encouragement to the people to see Joshua before them in the field of battle and Moses above them on the hill. Christ is both to us, our Joshua, the captain of our salvation, who fights our battles, and our Moses, who ever lives making intercession above, that our faith fail not. I love that. And we've seen this over and over, how Jesus can manifest like both positions that seem contradictory. So, for example, he's the high priest and the lamb that the high priest offers, right? He's the lion and the lamb, right? In John, he's the shepherd who is the lamb. Well, here he is the warrior king who goes out, the military general. He's also the mediator who intercedes on behalf of his people. And notice chapter 17, verse 14. The Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book, recited in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. This is interesting. This is the first time Moses is told to write anything down. Significant, isn't it? And it's the moment when God gives victory to the Israelites over the Amalekites. And notice, it's not just so that we can have a record of this, that's a part of it, but notice who has to read the story. It's your boy Joshua. Now, think about why that is sort of an obvious answer, isn't it? Have you ever met a guy before, right? They all have the same problem. Every single one, every dude you meet have the same problem. It is the male ego. It is what makes them great. It is what makes them awful. So you ladies know what it is I'm talking about. You have to balance between stroking his ego, but not too much, right? You have, because men need affirmation, right? That's the ego. But you got to be careful there, right? The male ego is just, I think I've told you all before, last week, to give you an example of this, I had to coach both the boys team, who I coach, and the girls middle school team. And middle school is a fun age. I prefer middle school over high school, but it will be the death of me. All right? And it is two very different worlds. If I could take just a fraction of the male ego and give it to the young women in sports, the world would be a better place, right? I mean, you can't stop guys. I mean, I have players who will not take a water break because water break is their opportunity to prove how awesome they are. It wears me out. Take a sip of water. I'm going to run you like crazy. Just take a sip of water. No, coach, watch this. From 80 yards out, I'm going to go right in the corner. Like, no, you're not. You're not that good, okay? You know? Hey, someone get in the goal. I'm going to show you how awesome I am. You're terrible at this. The girls, on the other hand, have none of that. Absolutely none of that. So the first day I had to coach both. I had my assistants take over the boys, and then I took over the girls when we started scrimmage, and helping out there. And to me, when the ball goes out of bounds in basketball, the game stops because basketball's terrible. But in soccer, the game keeps going. The clock keeps running. There is no stopping in soccer. You could have your leg could be severed from your hip, and the clock still keeps going. It does not stop for anything. Which means when the ball goes out of bounds, you've got to get it back in. Now, the boys get that, right? We got to go. You got to beat the team. Rah, ego. The girls, they don't. And it wears me out. And I have to keep telling myself, I'm not their coach. I'm just a substitute. I cannot expect them to play the way I have coached the boys for 3 years. Because what they would do, the ball will go out. Let's say it's 10 yards outside of our makeshift boundaries. And one of them will eventually walk over there to get it. But in the meantime, they have to continue that conversation the last time the ball went out. Drives me crazy. I mean, it would take 5 minutes to kick the ball back into play when there's supposed to be a go kick. Come on, we got to go. The clock is ticking. Wears me out. So here's Joshua, right? He's going to say, look at us. We're hungry. We're poor. We don't have a home. But your boy led us to victory over the Amalekites. We weren't ready for them. No, but your boy got them ready, and we put King Amalek in his place. Your boy did that, right? He's going to be on all the news station, the cover of all the magazines, right? Because he's photogenic. At least that's what he's told himself every day, right? But God says, no, write this down so that Joshua knows the victory belongs to the Lord. It is not his. Now, yes, God used Joshua, but it is not solely Joshua's. Joshua is an instrument of victory. So what it is we get in verse 15 to 16 is the confession of divine help is made by building this altar. So Moses built an altar and called the name of it, "The Lord is my banner." Now that banner is significant, right? Because it has a military picture to it. We have flags. They would have banners. And so this phrase of banner, the same word, shows up at least two other places that's significant. Psalm 60, you have given a banner to those who fear you, that it may be displayed because of the truth. And then here's Song of Solomon, like the one verse we know from Song of Solomon, and we never even think about the context. He has brought me to his banquet hall. His banner over me is love. Right? It's the children's song. I am his and he is mine. The banner over me is love. Right? Yeah. Thanks to Mark, I was able to remember that kid's song this week, right? But it has nothing to do with God's love for you, okay? It has to do with a man's love for his girl, right? I mean, I don't know. So if you want an example of taking a passage out of context, there you go. But here's the thing, is the Bible presents God as our helper over and over again. Let me give you just a few examples of this, many of them from the Psalms. Psalms 30, hear, O Lord, be merciful to me. O Yahweh, be my helper. Notice that help and mercy are colliding there in the parallelism. Psalm 54, save me, O God, by your name, and vindicate me by your power. Hear my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the sustainer of my soul. Psalm 118, 7, the Lord is for me among those who help me. Therefore, I will look with satisfaction on those who hate me. Boy, that would be a verse worth remembering every time you get on Facebook. Psalm 121, I will lift up my eyes to the mountains. For where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, who made heavens and the earth. Can I just add a footnote here that I feel like we always have to mention because we live in confusing times. That word help or helper is first introduced to us in the Bible, not in the Psalms, not in the battles against the Amalekites, but in the home. Genesis chapter 2, the Lord God said, it is not good, remember that phrase, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper for him. Whenever I taught ethics at Mid-Continent, a lot of the women who had been shaped by feminism would hate this verse. I am more than a helpmate. Like, you can't be more than that. If God himself is a helper, how essential is the role of the woman in the household and in the community? I mean, it just makes sense. So we need to elevate that title. It's not the Bible that is diminishing women. It's the culture that has diminished women. So what I used to always do with my classes, I do this in ethics class all the time, is I will give about a dozen of career options. Construction worker, secretary, doctor, pediatrician, bricklayer, right? A lineman, not to give that one away, right? And I would say, everyone, you tell me the gender you associate with that role. And every single one of them, the linemen are with men, right? A football player, men. Coach, usually men. Teacher, women. Secretary, women. Nurse, women. What do they have in common? They're geared towards help. I mean, now, I know what you're thinking. What do you mean by woman, right? And I have no idea because I'm not a biologist, okay? So you need to back off that train like, whoa. But please, vote for me to get in the Supreme Court. I'm sorry, it's too political. Here, let me, I'm not put that up there. Apparently not. Yeah, there it is. There is none like God, O Jerusalem. That is who rides through the heavens to your help, through the skies in his majesty. Notice the majesty of God who comes to help. So I don't think a helpmate is a demotion, because God himself will accept it for himself. By the way, Jesus will describe the Holy Spirit as the helper, we translate it, advocate, counselor, comforter. And then that word translated helper in the ESV and other translations, John will later use to describe Jesus. So if Jesus, the Spirit, and God the Father are okay with the title, ladies, I think you've got an advantage over us. Because if you're the helper, what does that say about men? They need help. You're like, now I get it, right? You're exactly right. Yeah. That's divine help. Let's look quickly, chapter 18, at communal help. We won't be able to go in all the detail here. The chronology of this is difficult. After all, if you read through chapter 18, as I trust you did earlier today, Moses' wife and kids are with Jethro. And people are like, well, how did they get there? Shouldn't they be here? And I don't have the answer to all that. Because what you find in the Bible, because it's an ancient document, chronology isn't as important as it is to us, right? So my wife and I started a series. There's 3 timelines. It's the same character in 3 different timelines. So the present is actually the latest timeline, where he's reflecting on 2 previous timelines 10 years apart. And it makes it really confusing. But in our head, we have to have these timelines. And in the ancient documents, that's not the case at all. Sometimes that's the case, but not always. So John plays with the timeline all the time. He tells you things that have already happened, and then he tells you the story of how it happened. So in John 11, he'll say, oh yeah, this is the Mary that anointed Jesus' feet. And you're like, well, when did she do that? In the next chapter, right? Right? You're just supposed to know that, you know? He puts Jesus cleansing the temple at the beginning of his ministry, not the end, assuming that there's only one event there. And so it gets really trippy with some of that. And so maybe this isn't chronological. I do not know. But it doesn't matter anyways, because the reason chronology matters less important is because themes matter the most. So we saw how God or Moses serves as mediator, and so you get divine help over Israel. So here you have this priestly figure, and now as they move beyond the Amalekites, which you get in chapter 18, he is in need of help. But where or how does God provide help for Moses? He does it through the community. He does it through people helping him. Moses is overwhelmed with the job he has, but God helps him by putting people in his life to lessen the burden. And that is a hard lesson for all of us to learn. So verses 1 through 12 is Moses' testimony to Jethro of divine help, right? So we met Jethro back in chapter 3. He's introduced here. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock, so on and so forth. So notice he's a priest there, and the question is, what kind of priest? Well, it's interesting. He's a shepherd priest, but then we discover he's the chieftain, so he's a royal priest, which puts him in a line of shepherd royal priests throughout the Bible. Adam, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Melchizedek is a royal priest. Moses is a type of shepherd royal priest. David becomes a shepherd royal priest, right? There's this theme running throughout, right? Balaam, maybe. Jesus fits this. He is greeted by shepherds, but he comes as the royal priest. So this is a theme you do see throughout the biblical text. We also meet his kids. I just don't have time to read through all this. Verse 3, Gershom means sojourner or foreigner. Remember what we said in the story of Joseph? We are sojourners among exiles. Verse 4, we meet Eleazar, which means God is help. That El gives away the God. So in naming his son God is help, which again, we're given this name after God shows divine help with water, with bread, and now with war against the Amalekites. Moses is confessing that God has liberated Israel without sword, without war, and he continues to protect them. And so what Jethro does in verses 5 to 12 of chapter 18 is he praises Yahweh for his work. And remember, the primary purpose of liberating Israel was so that God would receive glory among the nations. God is a global God. Verse 11 is well, let's do verse 10 and 11. Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh." Well, can I just add this footnote here? One of the reasons why these two stories are probably put together is because genetically, the Amalekites and the Midians, where Jethro is chieftain of, are closer together than the Midians and the Israelites. The Midianites and the Amalekites are descendants of Esau. Now, Israelites, Jacob and Esau, are, of course, have similar, common father. But that may be another thing. As the Amalekites warred against Israel, the Midianites responded with reconciliation. Anyways, verse 11. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. Now I know God is greater than all the gods. Yahweh is greater than all of them. Now, with all of that, Jethro is hanging out with his son-in-law, and he starts noticing and he observes something that is dangerous. And that is that Moses is carrying a burden that will overwhelm him. In the ancient world, kings were personable and they were approachable. Kings were not only military leaders by which they would lead their armies in the battle. Not always. David sometimes did. Sometimes David didn't. But usually would. They would also adjudicate cases. The best example of that in the Bible is Solomon, right? Saying, well, let's cut the baby in half, right? What is he doing there? Why is he the judge? Well, it's because he's king. That's the way it happened in the ancient world. Paul cites his Roman citizenship and has taken to Rome to stand before Caesar. You and I can never do that with the President of the United States or the governor. I know this because I've been trying to get with the governor for months now, right? And I just can't get it. And I'm working on the Attorney General next. However, historically in America, that was not always the case. The first several presidents, you could walk into the White House and go see him. Thomas Jefferson was the one who saw the White House as the people's house. And so there was minimal security. And one of the things that slowed government down with every new administration is that people would line up forever and ever, wait in the White House to see the president to get a job. This is one of the reasons why you elect a president in November and he starts in January, because you've got to get all those jobs lined out. But you and I cannot just call the president-elect committee and say, I'd like to be the ambassador to Great Britain, which is what the job I would like. You talk about good money for doing nothing. That's the job. Or I'll settle for Canada. Canada's not my taste. I'm more, as a soccer guy, I'd much rather be in North London rooting on my Arsenal Gunners. But anyways, that's the job I want. The most famous example of this is there was a man who went multiple times to President Garfield to get a job. And the guy was mentally unstable. This guy was convinced he's the reason why Garfield won the primary. He was not even on the ticket, but was appointed the presidential nominee for the Republicans. Gets elected president. Never sought office, right? Gets elected president. And this guy's convinced he's the reason. But then eventually feels betrayed when he doesn't get his job and he misreads some things. And he basically walks up to the president at one of his speeches and shoots him. And President Garfield died several weeks later. Probably died because one unsanitary, you don't care about this, but I do, so just deal with it. All the doctors who had unsanitary hands would stick their finger into the bullet wound. So he had tons of those. Also, there was a new invention that the president's doctors thought wasn't a real thing. They just didn't believe in it. We call it today an X-ray. The X-ray would have been able to find the bullet in the president's and probably would have saved his life. That's actually what saved Reagan's life, was they were able to finally find the bullet and saved his life. I don't know. That has something to do with Jethro. I don't know what it is, but there you go, right? But the point is that back then, you had complete access to the dude in charge. And Jethro's looking at this, he's saying, this isn't helping. And in fact, I don't know if I have, verse 17. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you are doing is not good. Now, we just saw a verse that said essentially the same thing. Only one time in my study have I been able to find the phrase, not good. And that is when Adam looks around and he realizes he is missing someone. This thing that you lack is not good. Yeah, it made sense, right? It's not good. Now, it doesn't say evil. Because there's a word that's opposite of good. It's not good. It's evil, bad. That's not the phrase. Something is missing. Now, what you're doing is good. You're serving your people. You're in leadership, all that. But how you're doing it isn't wise. It's not good. Well, what you see with Moses here and the burden he is carrying is a common one among leaders. Moses feels the pressure that all the burdens of leadership are on him. This is one of the many reasons where you see great leaders, you see a high level of melancholy or even depression. The two are related. By the way, this is why it's so common among pastors, because it isn't just the burden of leadership. It's the burden of spiritual leadership. And that is an added burden on top of it. And then you add a continuing decline of Christianity in America and whatnot. I've told you before, there's a buddy of mine who had a business. He was doing good and felt called into ministry. And so he is right now the youth pastor of his church. You've met him. He's been here. He's hung out up here before, and I've gone down there to see him. He is in many ways why I am still in ministry, if I'm honest with you. He's the guy who invited me to a small group, and I wanted to say no because I didn't want to go. But in the moment, I couldn't think of a good excuse. You ever have those moments? So we had to go. I just committed to it because I couldn't think of no. I wasn't doing anything else on Monday nights, and was a big part of sustaining me through ministry. Anyways, when he became a youth pastor, I said, in about 6 to 9 months, I want you to call me whenever it hits. And what are you talking about? I said, it's ministerial depression. It will hit. And you've probably never experienced it before, but it will be unique to anything. You've had pressures as a business owner, and I wouldn't want those pressures. Too much math. But this is different. This is very different, and you need to call me. If not me, you need to call someone else. And sure enough, we were just in a regular conversation. We'll call each other once in a while, and he said, man, I just for some reason have been like, I told you about this. Right? I've told you. I'll never forget the day it hit me. I was standing at the top of our stairs at the parsonage, and I said, I have one of two choices. I go lie down for no reason, or I can go downstairs and be productive. So I cleaned our basement. Right? That's the way. As I took the day off and just tore everything up and then fixed it all back together again. But if we allow it, it is our ego that keeps us from wanting to delegate things. We McDaniels are bad about that. My dad in particular is bad about, if you want something done right, just do it yourself. I ain't got time to teach you how to do it. And I struggle with that when particularly Elijah was little. I said, okay, little buddy, let's put the blocks together. And I would sit there like, I could do this so much faster. And I struggle with that, right? I could just do it and now we're done. Move on to the next thing. It's hard to do that. We are a family of independent souls. We're all very driven, and we struggle with that. By the way, men and women struggle with this. This isn't just a male problem. Can I prove it to you? My mother-in-law cleans houses for a living. She does it fantastic. And she's done it for years, as long as I've known her. But there are a few of her clients, and you know exactly where this is going. Let's say she's going to clean tomorrow. She's going to get there at 9 o'clock in the morning. The wife will not go to church on Wednesday night. Do you know why? She has to clean the house before the house cleaner comes. Why is that, ladies? You know why. I picked on the male ego, but there's ego in you too. And of course, Kathy, picks on him a little bit, right? Like, I don't understand. Like, I come in, the house is immaculate, right? And she'll say, look, you don't need to do that. You've hired me to do this. And she goes, I'm not even doing any good. You've already vacuumed, and I vacuum. You've already done the dishes, I do the dishes. You've already dusted, and I dust. You've already made the beds, and I make the bed, right? All these sort of things. And they all say, I can notice a difference. Right? I couldn't notice a difference if I tried, right? It's this temptation to hold on to control, to get the praise and the credit. By the way, this pattern is that Jethro gives Moses will be picked up later. The apostles learned this. I didn't put that verse. I tell you, my thing up here is terrible. Acts chapter 6, right? It's where the deacons are appointed. Why? The apostles say, we can't do it all. But God has raised up helpers, if you will. Servants is the word for deacon. And they can do these things. And you notice that the apostles are not saying the ministry of the word is not superior to waiting on tables. They're confessing we are too weak to wait on tables. The Christian view does not have a hierarchy of what is better. And so until you are the preacher or until you're the deacon or until you're the elder, God isn't using you. That's not the case at all. If you are wiping dirty diapers of children in a busy nursery, you are doing it for the glory of God. And you are no less than anyone who is a Billy Graham preaching to thousands. The ordinary in the Christian world is extraordinary. So this thing you are doing is not good. And so what Jethro suggests is pretty straightforward. And that is a system of delegation. You have judges and elders and everything else. And this becomes the pattern for really the rest of Israel. And is a practical plan that we still use today, not just in churches, but in government. I mean, we realize now that when you elect the president, you're really electing more than just that one individual. You're electing an entire delegation of authority, most of which are unelected. Now, you may like that, may not like that, but that's reality. Someone has to run the Department of Education. The president can't do all of it. Someone has to run the Department of Defense. The president can't do all of that. One of my favorite leaders in terms of who serves as a good model for leadership among the presidents, you all know I have an obsession with the presidents, if you can't tell, is Harry S. Truman. I actually just read a book about the dropping of the atomic bomb, which of course he plays a major role in it. Harry S. Truman's main quote when it came to leadership was, "The buck stops here." Right, now, that has now become a way for Republicans and Democrats to yell at each other. When I'm president, the buck will stop here, but with my opponent, the buck stops somewhere else. You know, and that thanks, you just ruined Harry S. Truman and why I like him. But what really set him apart to his predecessor, FDR, was that FDR would enter into a room and they would have a conversation. And they would talk, and they would talk, and they would talk. And FDR loved meetings. Truman hated meetings. He was the sort of guy, you do not have a meeting that could not be solved in an email. Of course, they didn't have emails, right? And so he thought, all right, I'm going to come, and you're going to give your proposal, whatever it is, and I will tell you yes or no, and that's the end of it, right? If you ever watch West Wing, that's how the President Bartlett does it, right? And the way he does it, he makes a decision. He says, what's next? I'm done with you, moving on to the next thing. And that was Harry S. Truman. And this came into play, and people had to adjust that. He kept FDR's cabinet and all that sort of stuff in the transition, not to mention there's still a war, bad time to just do an overhaul. And so that's the way things were. Everything was quick and precise. We're just going to move on. Now, this really created problems whenever he went to, I think it was the Dotson conference or whatever it was called. It was whenever Truman first met Stalin and Churchill. Just after Germany had surrendered, Truman's goal was to get Russia in particular to commit to fighting the Japanese, which the Americans had been fighting. They had just taken over Philippines and other places. He really wanted Russia to commit to this. And he knew about the atomic bomb back in his head, but he really had to get the Soviets involved. But he was nervous. All of us would be, to meet these giant figures. I mean, you had FDR, you had Stalin and Churchill. Those three made sense. And then comes this guy to Missouri, right? You know, who's a good piano player, and that's about it, right? No one knew who he was. He was intimidated by these guys. By the end of it, Truman was less intimidated and more frustrated. He had a great line he put in his diary. I've got it here. He said, he complained that Churchill talked constantly while, quote, Stalin just grunts, but you know what he means. He then adds, I'm not going to stay around this terrible place all summer just to listen to speeches. He complained that when Churchill would meet in a meeting, he would talk and talk and talk and talk. I am not going to stick around this terrible place all summer just to listen to speeches. I'll go home to the Senate for that. I love that. Love it. But this is the basic system that Jethro sets up here. He offers counsel, not necessarily inspired wisdom, that is, you have to do it this way. But no doubt God is providing real wisdom through Jethro the Moses, a Gentile to a Jew. Now, when things are small, you can have one person run everything. But as things grow, it requires more delegation. And that's the system that you get here. So what is the point of all this? We got to go. You and I need help. Oh, wait, I got a picture of those three up there. Yeah. You and I need help. At times, that help comes directly from the Lord. Answered prayer, divine appointments, clear providential work. At other times, or really we should say most often perhaps, it comes through God using other people. That is to say, God uses others to answer your prayers. That's not surprising. But the opposite is true. God uses you to be the answer to other people's prayers. So do both. Be thankful for the people that God has put in your life and humbly seek their help because God uses them. At the same time, don't forget that God uses you. Be grateful for the opportunity and be faithful to the calling God has given you in that moment. Was there anything else you guys have here? The kids aren't here, so we can go as long as we want. Anything you all see in your reading of Exodus this week? All right, well, tomorrow and Friday, you are at Mount Sinai. And so we may stop there in Exodus. I forgot to look ahead. I don't know if we're doing the golden calf or not. I don't think we are. So we may be ending our study of Exodus this week, which I believe we then go to Joshua. So we're skipping a whole lot. But you got to do the whole Bible, 180 readings, so you got to do some skipping. And I think we'll do about 8 chapters there or something like that. So good stuff. All right. How about we stand up and pray?